CrossFit Control podcast. This week we're going to talk about positive self-talk. And this topic came about because I think we all struggle with this. And oftentimes when you see, I don't want to use the word hero, but you see these people on Instagram and Facebook and they are constantly achieving everything that they post. It's hard to stay positive on ourselves when we feel like we're constantly failing. And it's something Aaron and I discuss quite a bit behind the scenes, how we struggle with it as even being coaches. And so we just wanted to dive in and maybe talk about some better ways to give yourself some self-love. So Aaron, do you want to kick it off?
Sure. The first thing I think of when I think of positive self-talk is like during a workout, like we were just talking about this workout we're about to do. You got to believe in yourself. And even sometimes we're full of negative self-talk. Especially for me, it's when I run. Like my brain is telling me, why are you doing this? I don't want to do this. Like you're terrible at this. Like you're never going to get better at this. So you have to learn to shut that off, and actually believe in yourself.
So for you, it's running regardless. Mm-hmm. For me, it's when I'm trying to overcome an injury, and I'm very hard on myself. I think you and I have discussed like when these weight loss journeys happen and you start to go back downhill, you feel like a complete failure, and that's not the case at all because you actually reset every day. Mm-hmm. But for myself, I really struggle with. Does this sound like I'm echoing? No? Okay. Might just be my headphones. For myself, I really struggle with feeling like I'm a failure because I can't do a movement that I used to be able to do, or I can't hold on to a certain pace that I used to be able to do, or I'm getting winded more. That kind of stuff I really struggle with. I can't work out as much as I used to. So it's really hard to stay positive when you were able to do X and now you can no longer achieve it.
Yeah, it's easy to compare yourself to a previous time. Like when you were at your best, that's mainly when we compare. So like, oh, I remember when I hit that 500-pound deadlift. It's like, why can't I do that now? It's like, it's very easy to pick out that moment in time and start comparing yourself. Like, well, I'm worthless now. I can't do that right now. So I must not be doing something right.
Right. And so we're talking about workout specific, but Matt, before you started back to CrossFit, when you came in to talk to me about canceling, how was your self-talk at that point?
At that point, I mean, I was just beating myself up, kind of like Aaron. So Aaron talks about how he gets in his head when it comes to running. For you, Devan, it's coming back from an injury, trying to overcome that. For myself, especially at that point in time, and even now, and I see a lot of athletes do it too, it's when you're not meeting the expectations that you have for yourself. So I knew prior to, so it was April when I think I contacted you, from when I left in November all the way up until like the start of April, I knew that I should be moving. I should be going back to the gym. I know that, running a 400 meter shouldn't win me completely. And you start to beat yourself up because you're not living up to the expectations that you might have for yourself. So I think it's very important to kind of take a step back and realize, okay, you might not be performing at the level that you once were, but it's all about, taking into consideration at that time, how often were you training? How often were you moving? In April, I can compare back to, say, 4 or 5 months earlier. I was coming to the gym 5 days out of the week, and then I just cut completely, didn't do anything. So that makes it kind of tough. But yeah, just self-talk at that point. You got to take a step back and look at the big picture.
So how do you recognize when you're being hard on yourself?
That's a good one.
I get quite frustrated, especially with movement, and not even just movement. Nutrition is a big one. We talked about this during Aaron's episode. If I fall off the bandwagon, I get so frustrated with myself. I get incredibly irritable, and it's tough.
So I asked that question, how do you recognize when you're being hard on yourself? Because oftentimes we don't see when we're being hard on ourselves. We're just being on ourselves. But as coaches, you can see when someone's being hard on themselves. And I'm going to use the example of, we have an athlete who goes to a later class and they despise lunges. And if you're listening, you know who you are. And I will support you every step of the way. But I said last night, what's the one way to get better at something we don't like?
Do it.
Practice.
Yep.
And you can see it in their face when they're already being hard on themselves. And it's up to us as coaches to step in and give them that positive reinforcement. Let's talk about how can we get closer to that goal. And that's just one way of the positive self-talk. There's other things as far as like, so that's a movement, not movement specific. What am I looking for? Not movement specific, but my brain does this sometimes, everyone.
Do you mind if I piggyback really quickly
Sure.
off of that? So you talk about positive reinforcements coming from coaching. And ever since I started coming here and I kind of learned a lot from you guys and then all the professional development that I've done, being able to recognize when an athlete is being very tough on themselves. Aaron talked about motivation versus discipline in the nutrition sense and also coming to the gym. Mm-hmm. But not to discredit motivation, it is a very big factor. So I think as coaches, it's the compliment sandwich. Mm-hmm. Athletes, no matter, so say that later athlete was struggling with the lunges, you got to recognize the amount of work and progress that they've made towards that movement or towards being able to move closer towards the standard.
So you talk about the motivation versus discipline. The athlete's already showing up. It's showing us they have the discipline to be here. Do you think it's up to us as coaches to keep them motivated and keep them seeing that they're getting the 1% better? Like, we did that workout yesterday, and before, I never really struggled with lunges or anything, but I had to do the last 2 rounds at body weight, and I would have been really hard on myself, but I was actually excited that I was able to do the lunges to begin with. So I was positive about that, but it's not like that every day. And so what do you guys think as far as how do you manage an athlete who is maybe struggling?
I think you can really see at the end of a workout if somebody's struggling or if they struggled or if they're beating themselves up. And that's when you want to step in and be like, hey, do you remember last time you did this? You didn't do as well, or you did show up today, which is huge. And you completed the workout. It's like we all have things we don't like to do and there aren't our favorites in here. So just showing up and doing them versus skipping the class because there's running today or there's lunges today or there's deadlifts and I don't like deadlifts. I think
a lot of the times when when I'm coaching, and we brought this up, I think maybe during my episode, but Devin and I were talking about how when I'm coaching, and Aaron, you've seen it too, because I coach you pretty often. I'm always there to say like, hey, great job on today's workout. I try to point out one thing because I've worked in a lot of retail positions and customer service and things like that. But I think it goes outside of that, just no matter what's going on as a coach to be able to point out, hey, you did this better today, or you were moving well when it came to a movement that you're not very proficient with. I think just being able to approach your athlete and tell them, hey, I think you did extremely good today with moving, or I have a couple of athletes who have some lower body limitations, like they're very tight in the hamstrings and the quads. I go, hey, your wall balls, your squats, you're starting to get closer towards depth. Mm-hmm. I think athletes deserve to know that recognition and be able to hear that positive reinforcements going there.
Yeah, I think even when we're hard on ourselves, we all are, all 3 of us are very hard on ourselves sometimes in here. And it's like if somebody comes up and says, hey, good job on this today, we may not see the positive. We may not be being positive on ourselves, but that's where a coach can come in and help point something out that you did really well that day.
We could even dive into at some point how hard we are on ourselves, not just doing the workouts as athletes, but us as coaches, because we all set a very high standard for how we how we run these classes. And I don't do it so much now, but how many times have we went over something and like you feel like it went terrible, but in reality, like nobody really knows that we messed up. I mess up almost every day.
Most classes, I feel that way, to be quite honest.
Yeah.
Because I can always pick out like 5 or 10 things like, if I would have done this, I should have done this. I should have done that. So, yeah.
And I used to get so frustrated, and like you could visually see me getting frustrated at myself because I messed up something. And then I think it was when I was taking my level 2, they said, nobody knows. Like, nobody knows that you misspoke or you ran over on your timeline or that you went out of order on your progression. Nobody knows. Just do your best, coach, and make them 1% better.
Yep.
But we're talking about external motivation. And so we're talking about, we recognize the athlete being frustrated with themselves and they're looking down on themselves, and we are stepping in to help them. What is a way that the athlete can see it for themselves and give themselves positive self-talk? I
think framing comes into that, and taking that step back, looking at the bigger picture. Is it okay to drop names on this?
In a positive way, yeah.
Oh, it is. So, like with Whitney, with the cleans, and Whitney, if you listen to this at some point, I'm sorry for calling you out. But with Whitney, she got very upset with herself with the cleans, and then look at last night during Barbell Club, she almost matched her personal best after coming off of previous injury, and she's moving extremely well. So I think it comes into framing. So instead of taking that negative outlook of like, oh, well, I didn't hit 5 pounds over today, look at the fact that you moved well today. So helping the athlete kind of recognize just where they are at.
Perspective.
Perspective comes into in framing. So trying to help with athletes getting into that more positive mindset.
Do you think, was she aware of that before coming into the class, or is that you being the external? I'm trying to find, because it's our job to get these people pumped and just give them the absolute best hour of their day. Make them 1% better, get them to PR. That's our job. That's what we truly love to do. That's why the 4 of us are doing what we do now. But how can an athlete, maybe they have a bad day and we don't see it as coaches, and they leave. How do we make sure that their 30-minute drive home, they are positive on themselves? How, if you've had a bad day, how do you look at it when you leave?
You mean when I leave here or leave work or just in general?
In general. Yeah, it could be career path. It could be coaching. It could be athletic.
I usually just sit there and pick myself apart. I pick apart everything that I should have done, could have done. You know, you get yourself stuck in the past instead of realizing, like, I can't go back and change that.
Do you open up to Andrea about it?
Sometimes. I get really quiet whenever I am frustrated with myself. I get very quiet.
And she can probably recognize that, right?
She knows.
And so that's something like, I think Sierra does a great job of, she can tell when I get frustrated on myself, because I will call myself a piece of shit, and it just, I don't think anybody else has ever seen me in here do that, but obviously your spouse sees you behind the scenes, and I get really hard on myself, and it helps when you have a person who's behind you saying, hey, well, what can we do to get better? What do you need me to do? How can I help you? But I'm trying to find what is something an athlete can say to themselves on that drive home if they've had a bad day in here. Let's say they didn't PR, they might have tweaked something. Like Whitney tweaked her back a couple weeks ago, and I could tell she was frustrated. But I think I didn't talk to her until a couple of days later, right?
Yeah, it was a couple of days later.
And I said, it's going to suck for a couple of days, but this is what I need you to do. It's going to be really hard for day 1. It's not going to feel fun for day 2, and then in a week you're not even going to realize it's there. And that's what happened, right?
Yeah. So I think in the case of when you come in, no matter what happens during the class, having the perspective and the mindset of, this isn't like a say all, do all with a kind of situation with that. You tweak your back. I tweaked my shoulder. I can't remember what I was doing that day, and it took me a couple of days to actually approach you about that. But just kind of realizing, like, oh, this isn't everything. If I tweak my shoulder, we have the coach, like, we are here to give the adjustment. Say I don't hit a PR. Say I did not do the best on toes to bars today, which I didn't. And yeah, I can beat myself up with it. But I think it comes down to having the mentality of you came in, you moved, you're making the progress towards where your goal is, and then being able to recognize that as an individual.
Yeah, that's what I was wanting to get to, is when they get in the car, they need to tell themselves, hey, even though I might have not been able to do what I wanted to do, I still showed up and I got closer to the goal.
I remember this is a story from my last gym. We were practicing muscle ups for the first time, and I got one, and I wanted to go for a second one, couldn't get it. And I was so mad at myself, because I was like, I got one, why can't I get two? And my coach at the time, she made me write down on a piece of paper, on a Post-it note, that I got one muscle up that day, and put it on my mirror of my car so I would see it that entire day. She's like, take it into work. She's like, you need to be proud of what you did. She's like, you may not have got two, but you got one, which is more than you'd ever done before. Perspective. I mean, it's very, very easy when you're more competitive to be very hard on yourself.
I love the Post-it. I used to do that when I was at my heaviest and I was trying to lose weight. Mm-hmm. I wrote my goal on a Post-it, and I would place it everywhere, all over my house, at work, in my car, at the gym. Like, it was everywhere, and it was just a constant, this is the goal, this is the goal, this is the goal. So, I mean, we should do an episode on that, like, how do you stay motivated? But the big takeaways I want everyone to get, because we got about 5 minutes before Matt has to go coach, is it's okay to be hard on yourself. Give yourself 5 minutes. Set a timer. Give yourself 5 minutes to be hard on yourself. And then after 5 minutes, tell yourself 3 things you did well that day.
Yep.
And if you showed up, that's one of them. Just showing up is, they say it's half the battle. Honestly, it's 80% of the battle. Cheyenne, when she did her episode, I told her one time, I said, just show up for the warm-up, and if you don't want to stay after the warm-up, you can leave. And she said that plays in her head all the time. And she'll show up, and she'll tell herself that. And I said, did you ever leave? No, stick it out. So do you guys, so that's my piece of advice, is give yourself 5 minutes, and then give yourself 3 things you did well that day. Do you guys have any other advice that you would tell people?
My big thing would just be take a step back and kind of look at the big picture. So what if you didn't move well today? Think about how this experience, whether it be a good experience or a bad experience, can help push you towards whatever your goal is. So just kind of taking a step back.
Yeah. Be nice to yourself. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, you have to listen to yourself all day, all the time. So it's like, you need to be nice to yourself. I mean, give yourself a little bit of grace.
I like it. I think that's good for this episode. Thanks, guys.
Good time.
Yep.